Hi, and welcome back to the ServSafe Food Protection Manager Certification Training Program. This is Chapter 8, the Flow of Food Preparation. Our objectives of Chapter 8 are identify the following: correct ways to prepare prepping food to prevent cross-contamination and time temperature abuse. Safe methods for thawing food. The minimum internal cooking temperatures for TCS food. The correct way to cook TCS food in a microwave. The importance of informing consumers of risks when serving raw or undercooked food. Requirements for partially cooking TCS food. Methods and time temperature requirements for cooling TCS food. And time and temperature requirements for reheating TCS food. So, general preparation practices. When prepping food, make sure workstations, cutting boards, and utensils are clean and sanitized. Only remove as much food from the cooler as you can prep in a short period of time. This prevents time temperature abuse. Return prepped food to the cooler or cook it as quickly as possible. This is why you might not take out of the refrigerator a whole package of chicken. You might only take out, a couple of the chickens from the package and cook them. You never want to use food and color additives. Only use additives approved by a local regulatory authority. Never use more additives than are allowed by law. Never use additives to alter the appearance of food. Do not sell produce treated with sulfites before it was received in the operation. Do not add sulfites to produce that will be eaten raw. It's important that you present food honestly. Do not use the following to misrepresent the appearance of food: food additives or color additives, colored overwraps, lights. Food must be presented in the way it was described. For example, if a menu offers fried perch, another fish cannot be substituted. Food not presented honestly must be thrown out. Corrective actions. Food must be thrown out in the following situations: when it is handled by staff who have been restricted or excluded from the operation due to illness; when it is contaminated by hands or bodily fluids from the nose or mouth; when it was exceeded the time and temperature requirements designed to keep the food safe. Thawing guidelines. General guidelines for thawing TCS food include: you can thaw food in a cooler, keeping its temperature at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. You can also submerge food under running, drinkable water at 70 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. You must use a clean and sanitized food prep sink. You must use water flow strong enough to wash away food bits, and never let the temperature of the food go above 41 degrees Fahrenheit for longer than 4 hours. Some of you might be wondering, why is the water temperature okay to be 70 degrees Fahrenheit? Even though the water is 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you are thawing from a frozen state. Therefore, the food itself is never going to get to, by the time it's defrosted, is never going to reach the 70 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. General guidelines for you can also thaw by using a microwave. You can cook it in conventional cooking equipment immediately after thawing. Thaw food as part of the cooking process. Many people put frozen food items directly onto the surfaces. Common frozen hamburgers. Some foods may be slacked before cooking. Do not let the food get warmer than 41 degrees Fahrenheit. How do we thaw reduce oxygen packaging fish? Frozen fish received in ROP packaging must be thawed carefully. If the label states that the product must remain frozen until use, then remove fish from packaging. Before thawing under refrigeration, and before or immediately after thawing under running water. If packaging fish using a reduced oxygen packaging method, the fish must be frozen before, during, or after packaging, and include a label that states the fish must be frozen until used. When prepping meat, seafood, and poultry, these are some items that you need to keep in mind. Use clean and sanitized work areas, cutting boards, knives, and utensils. Prep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separately or at different times from fresh produce. Remove only as much food as can be prepped at one time, and return raw meat to the cooler as quickly as possible after prepping it. When we're prepping salads containing TCS food, we must prep the food in small batches. Only use leftover TCS ingredients, pasta, chicken, potatoes, that have been handled safely, cooked, held, and cooled correctly, and stored from less than 7 days at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. We must also consider chilling ingredients and utensils before use, and leave food in the cooler until all ingredients will be mixed. When thinking about eggs and egg mixtures in terms of prepping, we want to remember to handle pooled eggs, if allowed, with care. Cook promptly after mixing or storing at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Clean and sanitize containers between batches. Consider using pasteurized shell eggs or egg products for dishes that need little or no cooking. Promptly clean and sanitize equipment used to prep eggs. Eggs is a major concern due to salmonella. We also must take special care for serving a high-risk population with eggs. Use pasteurized eggs or egg products when serving raw or undercooked eggs. Under unpasteurized shell eggs can be used if the dish will be cooked all the way through, such as omelets and cakes. Use pasteurized shell eggs if eggs will be pooled. Promptly clean and sanitize all equipment and utensils used to prep eggs. When prepping battered or breaded food, prep batter in small batches. Store unused batter as quickly as possible. Throw out unused batter or breading after a set amount of time. Cooked food Cook food thoroughly. When deep frying, make sure the oil temperature recovers before loading each batch. Do not overload the fryer baskets, and monitor oil and food temperatures and cooking times. To package fresh juice for later sale, the juice must be treated pasteurized according to an approved HACCP plan. As an alternative, the juice can be labeled with this warning. Warning, this product has not been pasteurized and therefore may contain harmful bacteria that can cause serious illness in children, the elderly, and people with weakened immune systems. Produce. Make sure produce does not touch surfaces exposed to raw meat, seafood, or poultry. Wash the produce thoroughly before cutting, cooking, or combining it with other ingredients. To wash produce, use running water a little warmer than the produce. Pull apart leafy greens and rinse thoroughly. Certain chemicals may be used to wash produce. When soaking or storing produce in standing water or an ice water slurry, do not mix different items and multiple batches of the same item. Refrigerate and hold cut melons, cut tomatoes, and cut leafy greens at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Do not serve raw seed sprouts if primarily serving a high risk population. We must also consider ice. Ice, we should make ice from water that is safe to drink. Never use ice as an ingredient if it was used to keep food cold. When clean and sanitizing containers and scoops, store scoops outside the ice machine in a clean, protected location. Never hold ice in containers that held chemicals or raw meat, seafood, or poultry. Never touch ice with hands or use a glass to scoop ice. You will need a special permit or variance from your regulatory authority if you are doing the following: packaging fresh juice on site for sale at a later time, unless the juice has a warning label. Smoking food to preserve it, but not to enhance the flavor. Using food additives or components to preserve or alter food so it no longer needs time and temperature control for safety. Curing foods. Custom processing of animals for personal use, such as deer, rabbits, or or poultry. Packaging food using a reduced oxygen packaging (ROP) method. Sprouting seeds or beans. Offering live shellfish from a display tank. This is common with lobsters. These organizations that are requesting a variance must have a HACCP plan. The plan must include an account for food safety risks. The establishment must comply with the plan and procedures, and records must be provided and maintained. They must also follow procedures for monitoring critical control points, monitor the critical control points, verify the effectiveness of operation or process, and taking the necessary corrective action if there is a failure at a critical control point. We will talk more about HACCP plans in a future chapter. Cooking requirements for specific foods. The following foods must be cooked to a minimum internal cooking temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius for less than a second. Poultry, whole or ground chicken, turkey, or duck. Stuffing made with fish, meat, or poultry. Stuffed meat, seafood, poultry, or pasta. And dishes that include previously cooked TCS ingredients. The following items have a minimum internal cooking temperature of 155 for 68 degrees Celsius for 17 seconds. Ground meat, beef, pork, and other meat. Injected meat, including brined ham and flavor-injected roasts. Mechanically tenderized meat. Ground meat from game animals commercially raised and inspected. Ratites, including ostrich and emu. Ground seafood, including chopped or minced seafood. and shell eggs that will be hot held for service. The following foods require a minimum internal cooking temperature of 145 for 15 seconds. Seafood, including fish, shellfish, and crustaceans. Steaks, chops of pork, beef, veal, and lamb. Commercially raised game. Shell eggs that will be served immediately. The following require a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit, 63 degrees Celsius for 4 minutes. Roasts of pork, beef, veal, and lamb. There are also some alternate cooking times and temperatures for these food items. The following food items require a minimum cooking temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. No minimum time. Food from plants, including fruits, vegetables, grains, and legumes that will be hot held for service. The following requires a minimum internal cooking temperature of 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Tea. Automatic iced tea and automatic coffee machine equipment. Tea leaves should have contact with the water for at least 1 minute. Traditional steeping method. Tea leaves should be exposed to the water for about 5 minutes. Cooking TCS food in the microwave oven. Minimum internal cooking temperature should be 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius for meat, seafood, poultry, and eggs, if cooked in a microwave. When cooking in a microwave, we must cover the food to prevent drying. For even cooking, rotate or stir food halfway through the cooking process. Let the covered food stand for at least 2 minutes after cooking. Check the temperature in at least 2 places. General cooking guidelines. We must always specify the cooking time and minimum internal temperature in all recipes. Use thermometers correctly. Correct probe. Inserting it into the thickest part of the food. And at least 2 readings in different locations. Avoid overloading cooking equipment, and let the temperature of cooking equipment recover between batches. Sometimes there is a need for consumer advisories and disclosing certain information or health risks about certain food products. We must disclose any raw or undercooked TCS items on the menu. Note it on the menu next to the items, either by an asterisk with a footnote that can be used, and the footnote must state that the item is raw or undercooked or contains raw or undercooked ingredients. These consumer advisories, who order raw or undercooked, we must advise customers who order raw or undercooked TCS food of the increased risk of foodborne illness. Post a notice in the menu. Provide this information using brochures, table tents, or signs. The FDA advises against offering these items on a children's menu if they are raw or undercooked. Meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs. Operations that mainly serve high-risk populations, so folks of the elderly, the young, and immunocompromised, should never serve raw sea sprouts, raw or undercooked eggs that are unpasteurized, meat or seafood, such as over-easy eggs, raw oysters on the half shell, or rare hamburgers, and unpasteurized milk or juice. If we are partially cooking meat, seafood, poultry, or eggs, or dishes containing these items, we never cook the food longer than 60 minutes during initial cooking. Cool the food immediately after initial cooking. Freeze or refrigerate the food after cooling it. If refrigerating, hold it at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower and store it away from ready to eat food. Heat the food to its required minimum internal temperature before selling or serving it. Cook the food if it will not be served immediately or held for service. We must also monitor and document requirements for partially cooking. Which corrective actions will be taken if requirements are not met, how par-cooked items will be marked after initial cooking, and how par-cooked food will be stored separately from ready-to-eat food. Cooling requirements. We must cool food from 135 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit within 2 hours. Then you must cool it from 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower in the next 4 hours. You can you must cool these food items within the 6-hour time frame. If you cool food from 135 to 70 in less than 2 hours, the remaining time can be used to cool it to 41 or lower. Total cooling time cannot be longer than 6 hours. So, an example, if you cool food from 135 to 70 in 1 hour, then you have 5 hours to get the food to 41 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Cooling food. Factors that are affecting cooling are the thickness or density of the food, size of the food. Cut larger items into smaller pieces. Divide large containers of food into smaller containers or shallow pans. The storage type containers. Stainless steel transfers heat away from food faster than plastic. Shallow pans let the heat from food disperse faster than deep pans. Some methods for cooling food. Place the food in an ice water bath. Place it in a blast chiller. Stir it with an ice paddle. And use ice or cold water as an ingredient. When storing food for further cooling, loosely cover food containers before stirring them. Food can be left uncovered if protected from contamination. Storing uncovered containers above the other food, especially raw seafood, meat, and poultry, will help prevent cross-contamination. When you come back to reheat the food, food reheated for immediate service can be reheated to any temperature if it was cooked and cooled correctly. Food reheated for hot holding must be reheated within 2 hours to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 seconds. Reheat commercially processed and packaged ready-to-eat food to an internal temperature of at least 135 degrees Fahrenheit. This concludes our discussion of Chapter 8. Now go to Google Classroom and complete the review form. Thank you.